Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening. You are listening to Hey Human Podcast, and I really appreciate it. On this episode, number 26, I speak with Mr. Nick Pellegrino, and he's a restaurateur here in Nashville and the chef at Mangia, and it's a great restaurant. It's one of my faves. And he was gracious and sat down with me at his restaurant one afternoon. And we had this fabulous conversation about all the twists and turns that his life has taken. I don't want to give anything away. Man, what a great and interesting life he has led. And I re-listened to this episode when I was doing some edits, and I was laughing. He's super funny. Really great guy. I think you're going to enjoy this. At least I hope you do. And what I love most about Nick is that I learned about him through our conversation is that he is what I like to call a sayer of yes. And that is, he always said yes to an opportunity when it came to him. And man, I think that's such an important thing to remember, even to himself. Like, even in a moment where somebody said, hey, can you do this thing? And he thought, I have no idea how to do that thing. But he said yes to himself because he believed that he could. And to me, that's just such a great example of being a human being, of just getting out there, even in the face of fear or not knowing something or whatever it is, just to take that leap. I love it. I titled this episode, Sometimes Knowing Nothing is Everything. And I think that has many layers. You know, it means don't overthink it. It means get out of your own way, you know. And sometimes when you know nothing, you're actually more qualified than the people who are supposed experts of their field. I know that sounds weird, but you'll understand what I'm talking about when you listen to the episode. I hope you enjoy it. And, you know, I hope it gives you some inspiration, or a lot of inspiration, to just say yes to things, not to the bad things, but, you know, to the good things. And yeah, so anyway, little housekeeping, heyhumanpodcast.com. I'm on Instagram, Hey Human Podcast on the Instagram, and on Facebook also, Hey Human Podcast. And on iTunes, it's under Hey Human. And thank you guys very much for listening. I super duper appreciate it. If you could take a few minutes and review the podcast on iTunes, rate it, all that kind of stuff. It helps a lot. Get the stuff up in the rankings. So that would be awesome if you would do that. Other than that, enjoy the episode. Thank you for listening. It means the world to me, and for sharing, getting it out there and sharing it with your friends and family and such. I really appreciate it. Enjoy.
Hey!
Hi, Nick Pellegrino. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Do I need to speak like really loud?
Yeah, just talk like you
I usually don't have a problem speaking loud.
Yeah, well, you're Italian.
It's my nature. It's in my blood. I can't help myself.
Yes, and also we are doing this podcast, Hey Human Podcast, in case you are wondering and you just turned on your podcast and went, what is this? You're listening to Hey Human Podcast. And we are doing the podcast from Mangia, my favorite restaurant in Nashville. I eat here a lot.
You do?
I love this place.
Yes.
Because
we love seeing you.
I'm a celiac, and not only do they have tons and tons of awesome food for people who are not celiac and are normal and not weird like me, but everything on the menu can be made for weirdos like me, gluten-free. It's amazing. So I love this place so much. So Nick.
Yes.
Hi, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
You're an interesting character.
I am an interesting cat, as we say.
So you are in the restaurant business,
yes.
But you began your worldly adventures as a music person?
Yeah, I was a musician. From the time I was 14 years old, played music professionally, played guitar, played bass, sang, and did all of that, most of my adult life. Yeah.
And you still do that?
I still do it. I did it, like I said, from the time I was 14. And
what was your band name?
My first band's name was Numbers.
Numbers?
Yeah. And then, as I got older, I started playing in other groups. And worked a lot in New York City and Greenwich Village
Is that where
as
you're
a
from?
bass player. I'm from Staten Island, New York. Yeah, played in a lot of bands, and then as I got older and I started driving into the city more and more, and then I started landing a lot of gigs as a bass player in Greenwich Village, and I worked with a couple of different bands. I worked with one band called the Singles that were kind of a rock band in the 80s, dating myself here. And then I guess in like 89, I was asked by a guitar player that I had worked with. He says, hey, we're working with this girl, Wendy Wall, and she's like kind of a folky. This was when the whole Tracy Chapman thing was happening.
Everybody wanted a fast car.
Everybody wanted the fast car, exactly. So everybody was looking for that artist, and he said, hey, we're looking for this. I'm working with this girl, Wendy Wall. And this all came out of the Bitter End on Bleecker Street. I used to play the Bitter End all the time. I was in a couple of house bands. Yeah. I was in 2 house bands at the Bitter End. One with a guy named Baker Lee, who was actually a sound man there for a while. And then with the Singles, we would play the Bitter End every Tuesday. We did a residency there for like a year on Tuesday nights. It was great. So I bounced around Bleecker a lot, playing bass with different people. So anyway, back to the story. Baker calls me up and says, hey, I'm working with this girl, Wendy, and she's close to getting a record deal. That's the crane across the street backing up that beeping. Yeah.
A lot of construction in
Nashville. A lot
of
construction going on.
That's the way
here.
it is.
She said, hey, I'm working with this girl, and, she's close to getting a record deal, and, the bass player, we're not really digging him anymore, and we want to get rid of him. And, we want you to come and audition for the band. So I was like, yeah. He says, well, there's one catch. He says, he plays upright bass on a couple of songs. Can you play upright? And because I never say no to anything, I was like,
Smart
yeah,
man.
Of course I can.
Yeah. How old were you then?
I think I was 20.
Okay. At 20 years old, you knew to always say yes. That's good.
Exactly. I think, let me see, was I 20? No, I wasn't. I think I was 24 at the time.
Okay. I should always say yes to opportunities, not to like creepy things.
It is the opportunity, yes. Don't say yes to anything. Hey, get in this van.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Do you have candy?
I only get in vans with candy. Only with candy. It has to
White, nondescript vans with candy.
It has to be good candy. I'm
It's
not
gotta be good.
racist. It can be a black van.
Okay.
That's
hey,
cool.
black fans matter. Right?
Anyway.
So
you're 24.
So he says, you have to play upright. And I was like, yeah, of course I can. I said I don't have one anymore. I sold mine. I just made up just some kind of BS. I said, I'll have to borrow one. He says, don't worry about it. Just do it. He says, the audition is Monday. If she likes you, we're going to rehearse. We'll have one more rehearsal. And then Wednesday night, we're playing for the label at the Bitter End.
Did you have neon on at the time? Because it was the 80s.
I did not have neon on at the time.
Okay,
I did not. I don't even think I had spandex on at the time.
Oh my God.
But I did own a pair of Capezios, and they were in my closet.
What about Vans? Did you have Vans?
There were no Vans in the 80s.
Oh.
As far as I know, there weren't.
I thought Vans were an 80s thing.
I was really into the high top,
I'm an immortal, so every genre sort of.
I was the black high top Chuck
Nice.
Taylors. I was always into those.
Very cool.
In the
Those
80s.
are timeless.
They're pretty timeless, yeah. So I wasn't kind of stuck. Now I'm not saying everything else I wore wasn't stuck in the 80s.
So it's all good.
So he says, okay, well, Monday night's the thing, and this is on Friday. So I had a friend who played upright. I called him up. I said, man, I need a huge favor. And I knew he had a couple of basses. I said, I need to borrow one of your basses for a couple of days. He says, yeah, sure, no problem. Come get it. So I went and I got it. And there were
this is New York, so you're not driving. You're like on a subway with a giant upright bass.
Well, no, because this was in Staten Island. Because I lived in
okay.
Staten Island, and he was this is a guy I grew up with. One of my closest friends growing up.
Neighbory kid.
Yeah. So I drove down the street and I picked up an upright.
Got it.
And I brought it back to my house. There were 2 songs in her set that there was upright bass on. So I spent that entire weekend with a cassette, because this was the 80s, I had cassette tapes. I stood there with the cassette in my room, locked myself in there for the entire weekend, and I learned those 2 songs on upright.
Right.
And my fingers were like raw by Monday. Because, upright, the strings are 3 times thicker.
Yeah.
And, the spacing is different. So it was a little bit of an education. But I'm really good at woodshedding and winging it and, kind of learning things on the fly. So I went in on Monday to the audition, schlepped the bass into the city.
Yeah.
Went to the audition. Said, well, this is, played through the songs. This is great. Do you want to be in the band? I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's rehearse. We rehearsed the songs again. Went back in the next day on Tuesday, rehearsed. Wednesday night, we did a showcase for the president of the label. It was SPK Records.
No pressure or
Yeah, no
anything.
pressure. The guy's name was Charles Koppelman. who was a huge publisher in New York City. And so we did the showcase, and after the showcase, he comes back into the dressing room and says, let's make a record. So literally, like 2 months later, we were in the studio recording her record for SBK Records. It was really cool. And then the best part of it, we recorded with a guy named Rob Fraboni, who is a pretty famous engineer. He engineered a lot of the stuff for the band. He engineered the Last Waltz movie and had worked with Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, all these kind of people. And so he was doing the record. So I was all excited, to do the record. We go on, we start doing the record, and we get to the upright song, and he's like, hey, I know you're not really an upright player. And he says, I'm going to get this guy Eddie Gomez to come in and play upright. Eddie Gomez was like a guy, a session cat in New York that got paid like double scale to play. He was like, him and a guy named Ron Carter were like the two top upright players for sessions in New York. He says, we're going to get Eddie Gomez to come in. And it's like, dude, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not insulted. He said, no, but I just wanted to let you know. I said, look, I want the record to be great. And, that's not my thing. I can play that song, but I'm not a upright bass player. So he says, yeah, okay, cool. So they book Eddie Gomez to come and do the session. They give him double scale, which I don't even know what it was. Probably like $700 for a 3-hour session at the time. And they were doing the session on a weeknight, and I got sick. I had a really bad flu, and I had like 102 fever.
Oh my gosh!
And I get a call at like 9 o'clock at night, and it's from Rob Fraboni, the producer, and he says, "Hey, we're in here with Eddie," and he says, "I gotta be honest, man, this is just not happening."
No way.
He says, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of in bed with a fever now." I said, "But if you want me to come into the city and do it, I'll do it." He says, that would be great.
He said, I'm triple scale.
No, I was already getting paid to do the record, so I was like, it wasn't like they had to dangle any more money. I was like, look, man, I'd love to give it a shot. He says, okay, well, when can you get here? So I said, I'll be there in an hour. So I drove into the city, and I lived in Staten Island. So Staten Island's it's about 9 miles from Manhattan. And it can take you 20 minutes, it could take you 2 hours. It depends but it was late at night. So
it's like Nashville now.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I'll be there in an hour. So I went in there, and he says, we got a bass here for you. You don't have to, just come. So I show up. He says, all right, and you ready to give this a shot? I said, yeah, great. I put the headphones on. My ears were like all clogged up from my fever. And I went in there, and I did one take, and he's like, on the mic, I think we got it. Come on in and listen. And he says, how's it feel to bump Eddie Gomez off of a master session? I'm like, are you kidding me? He says, no, listen to it. It's great. He says that he was just trying to do too much with it, and you just played it real simple, and that's what it needed to be.
Sometimes doing nothing is everything.
Nothing is everything, yeah. So I did that, and that was like, and then there was like this whole buzz going around Bleecker Street, and I'd see other players that I'd work with, and they were like high-fiving me. Dude, I heard about the Eddie Gomez
Did
thing.
you get
That's
more work
awesome.
out of that?
I got some more work out of it. Then all of a sudden people were like, hey, can you come play upright on this gig? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So I started playing upright more often. Then we did a couple of tours with Wendy, and I did that for a while. And
did she take off?
We had a couple of videos on VH1. It never really took off.
Way.
Yeah.
Oh my God, totally YouTube.
Yeah, you can YouTube it. You can see me with long hair.
Okay, Wendy.
One video, Wendy Wall, WALL. And the one song was Real Love, was one of the songs. And the second song was Dig That Crazy Beat.
And are you in the video?
Oh, I'm in the video.
Oh, my gosh.
With hair down to my shoulders.
Oh, man.
Which is really, you can't see me now, but I do not have hair down to my shoulders.
No, you have normal short hair. I don't know if that's normal, but you have short hair.
Yeah.
Were you wearing the Chuck Taylors in the video?
I might have. I might have been wearing the Chuck Taylors.
I can't wait to see that.
There's a good chance.
But
yeah, so I had long hair, and I was playing.
Well, did you have like the mullet thing, or did you?
It's the mullet,
hair?
baby. It's the mullet. But we didn't call it a mullet then.
What'd you call it? Just
hair.
It was just hair.
It was just hair. It's plain on hair. So I did that. I did that with Wendy for a while, and did some other records, and then I had just gotten off of a tour with her, and I was going to be off for like 4 months. And I ran into a friend that I went to high school with, that I was really close with in high school, who was a chef. And he went to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, upstate New York, which is like the number one...
Sounds fancy.
Yeah, the number one cooking school in the country. One of the top ones in the world. And it's like going to military school for chefs. It's really tough. And I ran into this guy. He says, hey, I know you love to cook, which I did. I loved cooking. He says, I want to learn how to play guitar. Teach me how to play guitar. I'll teach you how to be a chef. I'm like, okay, cool. So I had a couple months off. I'm like, let's do it. And so he'd come over to my apartment, and we'd hang out. We'd open a bottle of wine. I'd teach him like 3 Led Zeppelin songs. And then he's like, all right, let's put the jackets on. He brought a chef jacket for me.
Oh, so cool.
And he says, if you're going to learn how to do it the right way. And I'm going to teach you like I was taught in school. He says, and I'm going to really be a pain in the neck about this. But if I'm going to teach you, you're going to learn the right way. So it's like the two of us in my apartment, and you know, I'm putting the jacket on. He's like, "You're not wearing the jacket right." Like he's yelling at me that my jacket isn't on right in the apartment. I'm like, there's nobody here.
Chefs are intense.
He's like, it doesn't matter if anybody's here. He's like, it doesn't matter if anybody's here. You have to have respect for yourself, respect for the jacket, respect for the job,
That's
or
amazing.
don't do this. Yeah,
that's like music. Whether you're playing for one person or 1,000 people,
you do the same show.
You do the same show.
You put the same show on. So he was like, you know, if you're going to learn it the right way. And then
that's awesome.
What happened was he would do these little in-home caterings for like, you know, 10, 20 people. And he invited me to come on a job with him one time. And we had such a blast. I mean, we were in there drinking with the people, having wine, and we just had a lot of fun. His personality's a lot like mine. We're both, you know...
You're so shy.
I'm very shy. Yeah.
Quiet. Morose.
Yeah, very morose. Very morose. Maudlin, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So I had so much fun doing that, and you know, Wendy's thing was not going to happen. You know, she wasn't going to do another record for another, you know, 8 months, and I was off the road. I had nothing to do, and then I was replaced in her band by somebody else, and I was like, you know what? Now I've got nothing to do. And
how are you making money on the side?
I was just doing gigs.
Oh, okay.
You know, I was just doing gigs. I'd drive into Bleecker Street, you know, 5 nights a week and just play with different acts on Bleecker.
You could make a living as a musician.
Yeah, I was making a living in New York, you know. Because I do, you know, the way Bleecker was, you know, nobody played in the club for the whole night on Bleecker Street. You'd do your set, and then there'd be 5 other people behind you.
Yeah.
So I'd schedule my night. I might do 3 or 4 sets
just
with
run
different
around,
people. Because everything's on the same street. So I'd park my car, get out with my bass and my rig. And
what a time to be in New York.
It was an awesome time to be in New York City.
Except for the rats.
For music. Except for the rats, yeah. But I mean, if you could deal with the rats, we didn't have a pizza rat then, which is unfortunate. But so I was making a living playing music. And, you know, I started doing this thing with my buddy, cooking, and I was having so much fun doing it. He says, you know what? We should open a place. I'm like, wait. I said, but what about music? He says, well, you got to make a choice. You got to decide what you want to do. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should. Let's try it. So we opened up this little gourmet shop on Staten Island, and we were doing caterings, and we had a little takeout business going. And
Italian, I assume.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Italian. And, you know, because although he was Italian, he was not an, you know, air quotes Italian chef. He was just a chef who happened to be Italian.
Are you an air quotes Italian chef? Or are you a chef?
I would say, well, I'm a chef, but I mean, my strength is mostly in Italian.
Air quotes Italian.
Yeah, air quotes Italian. Exactly.
Can I air quote?
Air quote that. Air quote me.
I'll air quote you on that.
So we did that. You know, we did that for a couple of years, and then I met my wife. My wife came into the place, and she was a pharmaceutical rep, and she needed catering for her doctors. And
you mean to say, hey, here's some snackers, and would you buy some drugs?
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
You know, I'm going to feed you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Here, write some prescriptions of these drugs that I sell.
Right.
She was a drug pusher.
Yeah, it was pre-donut.
It was pre-donuts. Yeah, exactly. So I would do some caterings for her, and then she comes in one day and she sees there's a guitar in the place, and she's like, "Oh, you play guitar? I play guitar too." And I said, "Oh, how cool! Play me something." I give her the guitar, and she's like,
"Were you already smitten?"
You were
gone already.
I was gone the moment she walked in the door. I was done. In fact, I was on the phone with my partner, and she walked in, and I said, "I have to hang up. My future wife just walked in," and I hung up the phone. And
so Italian of you.
It was very Italian of me. It was very confident, maybe overly confident. But so I was like, "Oh, you play?" And she's like, "Yeah, I play a little guitar." And she played a little guitar. So I said, "Hey, play me something." I give her the guitar, and she's like kind of fumbling her way through like Over the Hills and Far Away. And I'm like, "Wow, it's really good." She goes, "Now you play something for me." And I have a degree in classical guitar. And she was like, she turned red. She was like, "I'm so embarrassed. How could you let me do that? How could you embarrass me like that?" I said, "No, I'm not trying to embarrass you." And then she started, you know, she's like, "Why are you here? Why are you cooking? Why aren't you playing and writing songs and everything?" And then I played her some of the songs I had written. She's like, "You're crazy. you have to do something with this. So she was the reason why I got back into music again. And I started writing again, and I did a recording, and I started...
As your own artist?
As myself, yeah, my own artist. Yeah, my own artist thing.
In air quotes, of course.
In air quotes, absolutely.
That was the name of the album, air quotes.
Air quotes, my own artist thing. So I did this session.
Did you keep cooking or
yes,
chefing?
I was still cooking.
I guess you're not... Are you supposed to say cooking or chefing? When you
cooking,
get to a certain level,
are you cooking?
You can't call a chef a cook.
I was
Ruby
not.
Amanfu told me that she said you can't call a chef a cook.
And you can't call a cook a chef either.
Yes. It's like
at that time, I was still just a cook. I would never have called myself a chef at that point in my life. And so she heard this stuff, and she's like, you got to do something with this. So I went in and made a demo of some songs. And then I started bringing it around to the people that I know in New York.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, this is really good, but you should really think about going to Nashville. I'm like, but I'm not a country artist. And they were like, you should really listen to what's going on down there, because it's very, it was like, Steve Earle was happening, I Love It, guys like that. They were making those kind of records.
Yeah, good old days.
Yeah, when they call it, I think they called it the Great Artist Scare of 1994, when all those guys were getting signed. MCA was signing really cool artists. And so he was like, you should go to Nashville. So I went back and I told Janine, who was just my girlfriend at the time, I was like, hey, everybody likes this stuff, and they're like, you should go to Nashville. She's like, well, let's go to Nashville. Come on, we'll drive down in my car. She had this company car. She's like, we'll drive down. Let's just do it.
She's the best girlfriend ever.
The best girlfriend ever.
Oh my
best
goodness.
girlfriend ever. Let's go. So we, 2 weeks later, we got in her car and drove down here. And I
bet your road snacks are to die for.
They would become pretty good road snacks.
Yeah,
pretty good road snacks.
No smart food on your watch.
Yeah, and she actually got me an appointment with Capitol Records through a friend of hers, which was crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I'm this Italian guy from New York trying to, pitch myself as a country artist.
I love it.
Which now in hindsight was just insane.
Whatever.
Like Nick Pellegrino, yeah. Yeah, this next one from a little guy out of New York City.
New York, Texas.
New York, Texas way, Nick Pellegrino. So she actually got me an appointment with somebody at Capitol Records, and I went in and played my stuff, and the girl at Capitol was really sweet, and she was like, yeah, it's really good. She says, but I just can't see you being an artist here. She said, but your songs are really good. You should go and talk to some publishers. So, being like the New Yorker, I'm like, well, give me a name of a publisher. Tell me some publishers. She actually gave me the name of 3 different publishers and helped me set up appointments with them. And then she said, you should really go, are you affiliated with ASCAP or BMI or CSAC? I'm like, no. So she turned me on to a friend of hers at ASCAP, a woman named Pat Rolfe, who was just like my guardian angel when I moved here.
Yeah.
And I called Pat Rolfe. I got in the car and called Pat Rolfe, and I said, hey, there were no cell phones yet. We didn't have a cell phone.
You were just out your window yelling?
Yeah, I was just yelling.
Out the window? Oh, where are you?
So I called her up and I said, hey, I told her who I was and so-and-so.
You were at a payphone, you said?
Payphone, yeah.
I love it.
She said, well, come. What are you doing now? Come over and see me. So she's just, I've got nothing going on right now. Come over and see me. I went in and met with Pat, and she's like, Nick, your stuff's really good. She said, but it'd be a lot better if you lived here. She said, I'm going to set you up a couple of meetings. And she set me up a few meetings, and I met with probably 4 publishers within that first 2 days that I was in town. And they all said, hey, your stuff is really good, but you should move here.
Classic Nashville.
Classic Nashville. So I got in the car and I told Janine, and she was like, you need to move. I'm like, well, what about you? What about us? She's like, you move, I'll follow you. She said, come down here, just live here, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I came down.
She's a very wise woman.
Very wise woman. Or
I've
crazy.
not yet met your wife yet.
Yeah, she's just...
I know she's celiac, too.
She has celiac,
So I love her already.
Yeah, she's the reason why you love us.
I know.
So we moved. I moved down to Nashville, and when I got here, didn't have a job, so I got a job with Tomcats Catering. I had met him, Tom Morales, through a mutual friend, and he says, "Well, why don't you come work for us?" So they hired me. I started working backstage at Starwood, cooking for all the acts that came through. Yeah. And then he made me the chef on the Broadway dinner train, which was like this train that used to leave from downtown. Did this whole dinner thing, and it was perfect for me as a songwriter because it was only 3 days a week. It was like the ultimate gig, and I did that for 2 years. Then I got my first song cut.
What'd you get?
I got a song cut by Shelley Wright, a song called Alligator Purse, which was really cool. And Diane left CSAC, started her own publishing company, and I was her only writer, which was really great. And Diane knew everybody in town, so I was like, hey, this is awesome.
That's awesome.
So I got that cut with Shelley Wright, and then all of a sudden all of my songs were getting put on hold. And the wisest thing that anybody said to me was, baby, you can't buy groceries with a hold. It's because I was like, oh my God, this is it. I'm quitting my job. And so, the cool thing was then all of a sudden Shelley cuts this song, and she was on Polydor at the time, and there was like, it's going to be the first single. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. My first cut's going to be a single, and they went as far as, actually, there were still jukeboxes at the time. They printed up 45s of the song.
Amazing.
I have one hanging in my office at home. And literally a week before it got mailed to radio, they changed their mind and went with another song.
No.
Yeah.
Classic Nashville.
Classic Nashville.
Oh, man.
And then it's going to be the second single.
Shelley, wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't her. She wanted it to be a single.
Yeah. It's never the
There was a
artist.
guy named Harold Shedd that was running the label at the time, and Harold Shedd, discovered Alabama. He was a pretty big deal here in Nashville for a long time.
The state or the band?
The band.
Yeah. I think it's important for my listeners
for your listeners to understand.
Specifics.
Exactly. But he was, he's a pretty powerful guy in Nashville, and he was like all on board with this song. And then at the last minute, he got cold feet. It was like, it's too different, because it was kind of a different song, for radio at the time.
Do you remember any of the lyric?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Let's hear
it's all
some.
about the
Spit it
lady.
out.
We kind of based it on that song, "Call for the doctor, call for the nurse, call for the lady with the alligator purse."
Yeah.
And that was kind of the chorus
yeah.
of the song.
Uh-huh.
And then we wrote the whole song about it, and it was all about this magical woman who had this alligator purse. And at the end of the song, the payoff at the end of the song is. It's no secret, it's love that I use. I just carry this bag because it matches my shoes.
Oh, it's so great.
Because she thought, everybody thought like this woman with the alligator purse had all the secrets to life and love in the purse. And she goes, it's no secret. Love is the magic of the universe.
I love it.
Take it from the lady with the alligator purse.
I love it.
And everybody, there was such a buzz in Nashville about the song at the time. We'd go and play it at the Bluebird. And, I was playing the Bluebird on Saturday nights. And I was only here for like a year, and I was like,
insane.
Oh my God, this is crazy.
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
Except for it does, because it did for you.
It did for me, because I wound up with a group of writers that were all kind of happening.
Yeah.
And so, I was really fortunate.
Yeah.
And they'd take me in and say, oh, we got this new guy, and it was cool. And I was writing with this one girl. We probably wrote 100 songs together.
Yeah.
And so we had Alligator Purse. Never wound up being a single.
Was it on the record, though?
It was on the record.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
It made the record. Didn't
Awesome.
become a single. And then, that was the first session that I ever did in Nashville. And so when we went in to do the demo, I produced the demo. And that demo, they cut Alligator Purse, and then a song on the same session called 10 Pound Heart was cut by Shelley on her next record, and then a girl on Atlantic named Mila Mason cut the same song. And,
look at you.
Yeah, and so I was like, this is going to be easy.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so I was like, dun, 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 right? It's cool because my wife Janine is Syrian, and she said this expression one time, and I'm like, what does that mean? And she says, it means you have like the heart of a cow, like a 10-pound heart. You have so much love in your heart. You have a heavy heart. And I was like, oh my God, this is a song. I wrote down 10-pound heart, and I came into a writing session with it, and I wrote that song with the same girl I wrote Alligator Purse with, and a girl named Kenya Walker, and she's like, baby, that's a great hook. Let's write it. And we wrote it, and all those were like the two first songs I wrote with her.
Amazing.
And they both got cut.
Great.
It was great, and we were like, this is going to be awesome. We just keep writing together. And we wrote kind of quirky songs. They weren't like your normal songs.
I like quirky,
There's kind of a buzz in Nashville about these songs that we were writing for a while, and we were playing the Bluebird and getting all this attention. And then, so I was doing all these demos for my publisher. And she was writing for Hay Street at the time, which was Don Schlitz's company.
Sure.
And
one of our biggest songwriters of all time.
Yeah, of all time. Just a great, incredible songwriter. I think he's had 35 number one songs.
I mean, it's
Insane. And
I think
he used to do this thing on Mondays at the Bluebird called Dawn for $1.
Yeah,
I don't know if you were here, but
I think I remember that.
And I remember going to those things when I first moved here. And it was a Monday night, and you'd pay. No, maybe was it Monday? No, because the Blue Bloods did Mondays. Tuesday night, I think it was Down for $1. And you paid $1, and you sat there and you watched this master songwriter just think, what am I going to play now? And then he played The Gambler.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. And
It's
then,
crazy.
and then he play, When You Say Nothing at All. I'm like, oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah.
And what an inspiration. And then I started writing with this girl that wrote for his company. So I was like seeing Don Schlitz. I'm like, hey, Don. He's like, hey, man, how you doing? Great song. And like, oh, my God. Don Schlitz just said I wrote a great song. Oh, my God. I'm like doing somersaults running out of there. So anyway, to fast forward all that, then I started producing demos for other writers at Hay Street.
Yeah.
And then I started producing demos for BMG and a couple other publishers, demos for Curb. And my publisher at the time, she's like, you should think about producing. And I'm like, I never thought about that. When you're in a band and you're making recordings, you just go in. There's no producer.
Yeah.
I didn't know what even the producer does.
Yeah.
And so then I started producing things, doing a lot of
Where
demos.
was your
and
girlfriend
things.
at this point?
She was still in New York.
Okay.
And then, after I got my song cut, I went and bought an engagement ring. Went back there and we got engaged. The first song cut, yeah. Because we were both convinced, this is it.
That was it.
We're going to put your house shopping. We'd drive through Belmead. I like that one. So do I. And it was that kind of a thing. And so we got engaged, and I lived here for about almost a full year by myself, and then she moved here, and we lived here together for another 6 months, and then we got married here.
Yeah.
And so it was great. That's how we wound up in Nashville. And then I did that, started producing demos, and then I would, I kept writing with artists and
you're producing?
Producing. I started writing with a guy from Texas named Walt Wilkins.
Oh, wow.
And wrote a bunch
Also
of stuff with Walt.
Also a killer writer.
Yeah, I wrote a song with Walt called Our Lady of the Avenue. Walt's girlfriend at the time, his wife now, Tina, used to work in a bar on 16th Avenue called Sammy B's. And he came to me one day with this idea. He's like, man, these guys, they come into this bar like they're going to church. And I said, well, what's the name of the church? He says, Our Lady of the Avenue. And I said, okay, you picked the right Catholic to write that with. So we wrote this song called Our Lady of the Avenue, and it was on a record that I actually put out on a label that I was running at the time. And it became like a big song in Texas. And so I wound up with, I think, 2 cuts on that first record with Walt, and then a cut on every other one of his records, like 3 records following. And now he's got a band called the Mistiqueros in Texas, and they're pretty big down there. And they've put one of my songs that I wrote with him on probably 2 out of the 4 records that they've made.
That's insane.
Yeah, so my songs are getting played in Texas, which is really cool. Because I really dig that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that style of writing.
Is that real mailbox money, as they call it?
No,
or is it just,
not really.
No?
Not really.
But it's pretty awesome cred.
It's awesome cred, because, I mean, he's like, pretty revered in Texas as a big-time writer.
Yeah.
And Walt and I wrote probably 75 songs together, a bunch of stuff. And we had a band here in Nashville, the Walt Wilkins Band, for about 10 years. I was the bass player in the band. And I'm the one who said, because I was writing with Walt, and I was like, man, why don't we have a band? I said, I'll play bass. Let's just get it. And wound up, the band was me playing bass. Billy Block was the drummer.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah. And a guy named Rick Plant was the guitar player. Mike Daly, who plays with Hank Jr., and Travis Tritt was the steel player.
This super band.
It was a great band, yeah. And a guy named Tim Lorsch played fiddle. And we played in Nashville for almost 10 years. We did a residency at the Sutler for like 2 summers on Monday nights. The old Sutler, not the new Sutler. And so, we had this band for 10 years, and we wrote, and then Walt moved to Texas, and, we haven't written together since, but we're still brothers, and, So that was a lot of fun doing that stuff.
Oh, my.
No mailbox money, though. No,
Yeah,
I get a
what
little
a
bit of money
story.
from Our Lady of the Avenue. They play that quite a bit in Texas still.
I'm going to have to listen to that one, too.
Yeah, and they play that quite a bit in Texas. And then, believe it or not, the most mailbox money that I get is from an EP that I did myself here, probably in 2007 or 2009. I called it Little Nicky. And it was all songs that I wrote by myself. I played mostly everything on it, except the drums and bass on a couple of songs. And then I just, I started doing gigs in town for myself again. And this was a rock band. This wasn't me trying to be country anymore.
Right.
So all of the songs on that EP, there's 6 songs on the EP, every single one of those songs has gotten television placements.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which is crazy because and there are little things like there's a show called Flipping Out on Bravo that I've got quite a few songs on. Say Yes to the Dress.
How do you get them on the show?
When I made the record, I gave it to a company called Jingle Punks in New York. And Jingle Punks basically is a source library for television.
Yeah.
And it was a great deal because, you keep your publishing. They get the master use license. They get that, which is usually a couple $100.
Yeah.
And then you get all their performance royalties. And they basically have a service where you go in there and say, okay, I love Matchbox 20. I want a Matchbox 20 song, but I don't have $100,000 to license it. So here's 4 bands that sound like Matchbox 20.
Sure.
And so they put me in all these different categories, and I was fortunate enough that they picked just about every song from that
That's
EP
incredible.
that I made. Yeah, so that was really cool. And then I started singing jingles here in Nashville, which I always wanted to do in New York, and never could get into that game in New York because it's so locked up. There's like 3 guys in New York that sing everything.
Yeah.
And so I was singing background on a session here for a co-writer, and the engineer in the session was like, man, you're just really good at this. Did you ever think about singing jingles? I'm like, yeah, I've always wanted to sing jingles. He says, well, I work for this jingle company here, and he says, I'll give you a call if something comes up that I think you're right for. And about 3 months later, I'm eating dinner, and we were married at the time. We were eating dinner in the house. And
You're still married at the time.
Still married at the time, at this time, right now. We had gotten married by then. That's what I should have said. And stop me if I'm blabbering too much.
No, I
just
love
on
this.
a trail.
This is incredible.
Because you don't know all this stuff about me. You just know the guy who makes the gluten-free bread that you love.
That I love. It makes me happy.
So I got a call at dinner time, and it's from this engineer. And his name was John Mills. He did a lot of stuff. He engineered Philadelphia Freedom for Elton John. He was like, there was a point when John Mills was a pretty happening engineer in the pop world. He says, man, I'm doing this demo for a commercial, and what are you doing? It pays $50. He says, but if it gets picked up, you'll get union scale for it, and it's getting pitched for a national thing. He says, can you come down and sing it? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, literally, I got in the car, drove to a studio on Berry Hill, and I sang. I spent like 2 hours in the studio. It was like, he says, we're doing this Beach Boys thing vibe for this. It's called Brummel and Brown Fruit Spreads. And it's like, it's nothing like nothing like 'em under the sun, and you got to do all the harmonies. And I'm like, yeah, I could totally do that. So I did it. I stacked all the Beach Boy harmonies. I did the thing. Sounded really cool. He says, all right, man, we'll see what happens with it. A year later, I get a call from him and says, hey, remember that thing you did, that demo? It got picked up for national television spot, and they're going to use the demo. I'm like, no, stop it. He said, yeah.
A year
later.
Classic Nashville.
I've forgotten about it. I was like, okay, great, whatever. So then it was a national TV spot, and man, I made a bunch of money from doing that.
Heckin' A, yeah,
and
you
the
did.
best part was I got free health insurance for 3 years.
Because of the
AFTRA union. Because if you make a certain amount of money through AFTRA, they pay your health insurance.
Oh my gosh.
And it was good insurance too.
Yeah.
It was really awesome insurance.
Hey, unions,
like,
man.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
up?
And then I took that, pretty much a tape of that song, and I started going to every other place in town that did jingles, and then I started doing jingles here.
Do you still do that?
If people call me to do it, I'll do it.
So what
I sang all the
life you're having.
I sang
It's
all
crazy.
of the crowd chants. I got called in from one guy. He says, man, I know you can make yourself sound like a bunch of different guys. He says, I'm doing this thing
I'm
for
actually
Madden.
multiple personality
Multiple
disorder.
personalities, yeah. He says, I heard you were in an AC/DC cover band. I said, yeah. He says, so you can sing that stuff? I said, oh, totally. I could totally sing that stuff.
Bon Scott now?
Bon Scott
Brian,
and Brian.
Arford Johnson.
This is the Brian Johnson one.
Yeah.
I mostly sang a lot of the Bon Scott stuff, and I didn't do a lot of the Brian Johnson, but we did some of it. So it's like, I'm doing this thing for the Madden, EA Sports Madden, and they don't have the money to get the real recordings, so they want to do re-records of You Shook Me All Night and Enter Sandman by Metallica. He says, why don't you come in and sing them? It pays like $350. I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Man.
So I went in and I sang this sound alike, and it sounded, they nailed it.
Wow.
And I sang it, and it sounds just like the records, which is really cool. So then they wound up not using it. because they couldn't even afford the publishing on it. So they're not going to use it. But they want to do all the crowd chants. You know, like when you like "We Will Rock You" in the stadium and "Zombie Nation" and all this crowd. He says, "Come in and do that." And I went in and I did that with the guy who plays drums for Rascal Flatts, this guy Jim Riley. And the two of us sat there and we did all these crowd chants. And they're still in the game now.
That is incredible.
Madden game. So when you hear the crowd doing "We Will Rock You," that's me.
Oh my God.
And my nephews at the time in New York, I told them that. I was like,
they thought that was the coolest thing ever.
This is the coolest thing I've ever done. I'm like, you don't understand. I've been on television. I've been on the road. I said, Uncle Nicholas, this is unbelievable.
So cool.
So then, so I did demos.
So when did you? So my God, it's already like 7 people's lives smushed.
It's a lot of life.
Yeah.
It's a lot of life. Well, you know, I've always been a hustler. You know.
Yeah.
Did whatever I had to do. You have to.
And you had to say yes. You had to be like.
I never said no to anything.
Yeah.
I really didn't. And that was, you know, I've been very fortunate that not saying no to anything has worked out in my favor most of the time. And
your then and now wife as well saying yes to you.
Exactly.
And being a champion for you, clearly, which is incredible.
I mean, talk about, you know, I
without
wouldn't be here.
Fear,
I wouldn't be anywhere or anything without.
Because I think a lot of people would be, oh no, you can't go do this thing in Nashville. You'll be away from me for a year, and I don't want that for our relationship. So she's like, go, we'll figure it out. That's not.
Well, there were days when she probably rethought it.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Maybe I should put a little more thought into that. But you know what? It's been the best and it's been the worst, but that's the nature of being an artistic mind. You know, you're going to have to deal with the times when you want to kill yourself because nothing's happening, and then you've got to really kind of stay level-headed when stuff really does start happening.
Yeah, and you got to really work your ass off.
You do.
And even when people are like, "Here, you're good, do this," you still have to work. You can't ever rest on laurels at all.
No, not at all.
You don't really get many laurels in the life anyway, for sure. So how did you transition into this, Mangia?
Well, you know, I mean, I'd done the whole writing thing, been through 3 different publishing deals. I wrote for Reba McEntire's company for a little while.
Starstruck.
I wrote for another company called Brumley Music, the family that Albert E. Brumley wrote "I'll Fly Away."
Yeah,
they had a publishing company here, and I wrote for them for a while. And, you know, it's just... I always tell people I have hit songs in drawers all over town. So, you know, nothing was really, really happening. I mean, I was making a living as a songwriter just on, you know, album cuts on records that nobody bought and publishing draws. And, you know, after a while, if you don't get the single, it's like, okay, great. But in the meantime, you've got hundreds of songs that are done. Now, what's going to happen with them? And, you know this as a songwriter. You got to hustle those songs yourself, or else nobody's going to care about it. You're the best person to toot your own horn. You know, if you nobody handles your business like you. No, of course
not.
That's
definitely true in any business.
It doesn't mean as much to anybody as it means to you.
Right.
So, you know, I did the whole writing thing, and then I got into producing stuff and produced some records for people, and then got into working at labels. Worked at a couple of labels in town. And then from there, transitioned into managing artists, which I did not enjoy, but it was paying my bills. And about 5 years ago, I was managing 2 different artists. I managed a group called the Grascals, who were a pretty popular bluegrass group.
Yeah.
And a country artist, Sammy Kershaw.
Another great artist.
Yeah. Great artists. And that's where it ended. Because... they drove me crazy. You know, it was just
herding cats.
Yeah, it was, and it was babysitting and babysitting people and helping people make money that just didn't really appreciate what you were doing. And I was not passionate about it because I was not being appreciated. And I just had this idea because I had cooked.
You gotta respect the family.
You gotta respect the family. If you don't respect the family, you have nothing. You have to respect. It's all about respect.
That's spot on.
What you guys can't see is Susan had an imaginary cat on her lap.
I was petting.
She's petting the imaginary cat. I'll tell you a funny thing about that cat in that scene.
Yeah.
Iconic scene from The Godfather.
Yes.
The cat just wandered onto the set.
Shut it.
Yeah. And Marlon Brando picked it up, just put it on his lap, and made it part of the scene.
Brilliant. Well,
brilliant.
He's a method guy.
Method guy. Just made it part of the scene.
They nail it.
And Francis Ford Coppola, they were like, "Do you want us to cut?" He was like, "No, keep going. And it's like iconic.
Totally iconic.
You know, and I love that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I was I was not passionate about the things that I was doing, but I had to do them to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be that person because I know 90% of the people I know in my life are those people. And they're not happy. You know? I mean, it's like, oh, well, why do you do this? Well, it's a means to an end. I was like, well, whose end?
Yeah, your end, buddy. The end
it's going to be
you.
your end.
Yeah.
So I had this idea to do just like a big meal, like a dinner club kind of thing. And I didn't want to have a restaurant because everybody's like, oh, you're such a great cook, you should open a restaurant. And I was like, no, I don't want to have a restaurant. And so I just had this idea to do like a big dinner where there was music and singing and Italian food, and nobody ordered. You just brought food out. Years ago in the 80s, I went to this place in Brooklyn called Two Toms. And it was a place just like that. And every night there would be a line outside. You didn't know what you were going to eat. There was these two guys named Tom that married two sisters that were amazing
also
Italian
named Tom.
cooks. Also named Tom. And the two Toms would run the front of the house and the sisters would cook in the back. And you'd set up picnic tables inside this place and they would just bring food out. It was cool.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a great idea. So I kind of took a little bit of that, a little bit of the movie Big Night, which was like, for me, anybody who loves food should see that movie. If you don't love food, you fall in love with food after you see it. And then all of the family meals that I had growing up, you know, my grandmother's house with 100 people sitting there on a table and table that's only meant to hold 20 people.
Right. And
just yelling and passing food and singing and the music and everything. And so I said, I want to try this. And at that point my wife was like, okay, another crazy idea. That's not going to happen because, But she supported me. She's like, good, just try it. And you know what? Just go for it. I don't care. We'll see what happens. So I had a friend that owned a little meat eatery out in Franklin that was closed on Saturday nights. And I just told him the idea. He says, well, we're closed. Let's just try it here. And we tried it. And, the first thing I did before I even knew what I was going to serve is I programmed the music. Because that's just the way that I think. Music is such a big part of everything that I do.
Sure.
And I really feel like it's a huge part of a dinner.
Yeah.
When you eat dinner, the music is so important.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. They don't get it. But if there was dinner and there was no music, then there would be something missed. They would notice something was missing.
When I go into a restaurant and the music is overbearing, it's weird. It's like your brain can't handle all of that. It can't be in so many places at once. When you're eating, you want to taste the food and you don't want to be bombarded. And plus, you want to talk. And
yes, and we would. My wife and I went to a restaurant. I was closed one Saturday night, and I went to this new restaurant that had just opened. It was kind of happening, and I walked in there, and they've got all these beautiful waiters and waitresses with the cool-looking shirts on, and the music is blasting. And I was like, this is like Abercrombie and Fitch with food.
Yeah, it's jarring.
This is not enjoyable.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was I knew it was going to take 3 hours to serve all this food, so I programmed 3 hours worth of music. And it made sense from the moment you walked in. It was really kind of subdued, and then it built up to this climax of the meal when you got the main course. And then after the main course, it just kind of eased back down to the point where it was like really mellow when people were saying goodnight to each other. It was like perfect. Exactly. Yeah, it was perfect. So we tried it, and we tried it for about 20 of our friends, and just to kind of see if it was even worth pursuing. And our friends were like, you got to do this. This is so cool. Nobody's doing this.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's where I first met you out there. And so we decided, let's just do it. And so I started a Facebook page.
Yeah.
And fortunately,
I think that's how I learned of it the first time.
Maybe, yeah. I had,
I remember calling and being like, I'm a celiac, there's probably nothing there to eat. And you're like, oh, contraire.
Because my wife had just been diagnosed right then, 5 years ago. So I was like, I have to really consider this because, your wife can't eat there. What are you going to do? So I
get a girlfriend.
Get a girlfriend.
Just kidding.
Just kidding, honey. There's no girlfriends ever. So, what was I saying? So I started a Facebook page. Yeah. But what the thing is, at that point I'd been in Nashville for 15 years.
I knew everyone.
I knew everybody.
Yeah, that helps.
And a lot of people in the music business. And, the first night I had all these producers there. Sheryl Crow was there the first night. This is after the 20 when I decided.
Yeah.
I just put a thing out. We're open for business. I basically sent out a letter to everybody that I had in my contact list.
Yeah.
Like pleading, hey, I'm doing something new. Would love for you to be there. it's $35 a person, $5 if you want to bring wine in, which was like crazy cheap at the time. But I'm like, let's just get people in the door, and then I can worry about making money. And that first night, we had about 50 people there. Like I said, Cheryl was there that night.
Did you do everything that you do, like the music and that?
I did. The music was there. We only sang one song. We sang the Frankie Valli, Can't Take My Eyes Off You.
Yeah.
Because when I had the idea to do this, I had this vision in my head of a restaurant, people singing that song all together in unison, like, I love you, baby.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the coolest thing. I got to do this. And then when it happened that night, and like here I am, I'm like, all these people, and then like Sheryl Crow is singing it with me. I'm like, this is awesome.
Oh my God.
And everybody was like gushing that night. It's like, you got to do this. I said, well, we're open for business. So that was Saturday night, and I put the phone number up online, and everybody there had the phone number. And it's the classic situation as a musician where your first gig, all your friends are going to come to your first gig. But what about the second and the third gig? If you suck, nobody's going to come back.
Right.
You've had the Mercy crowd for one time.
Right.
So I'm like, I hope, how people going to find out about this? And like the next day, Sunday, my phone starts ringing. I went and got one of those Google Voice numbers, which was free. And the next day, my phone's ringing. And every time it rang, I'd run, pick up the phone. I'm Mangia, Nashville, can I help you? And literally by Wednesday, the next Saturday night, was sold out. 50 more people.
Yeah.
And then, no joke, within 3 weeks, every Saturday night was sold out for a month and a half.
Yes.
Just word of mouth. I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And then we started adding seats, and we got it up to 70 people, and that was all the people you could fit in there. And it was just taken off, and Facebook and just word of mouth, and no advertising. We didn't have money to advertise. It was
Tummies across the land.
Tummies across the land.
We're advertising for you.
Advertising for me.
Yeah.
And then it just took off, and the place next door went out of business. We knocked the wall down, added more seats, wound up having 100 people a night. And did that for a little over 5 years at that location.
Yeah, and I went twice at that location.
You went twice, yeah. And I remember how excited you were when I brought over gluten-free food. You were like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I was so happy.
I know.
So happy.
Because I knew what it was like, especially in the beginning when Janine was first diagnosed. It was really hard to go out to eat.
Yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer.
It is, because you see everybody else eating this stuff.
And I missed bread. You don't really do the bread thing, but you do now.
Yeah.
But then I don't think you were.
I wasn't doing it then.
Yeah. And I remember you gave a warning to everyone in the room anyway. You said, don't fill up on bread.
I always said, don't fill up on bread.
Because we're talking more food than a human body can.
It's a lot of food.
It's
a lot of food. And it's 3 hours long.
And it's dancing, and there's music, and it's just...
Well,
you get to be friends with that because it's family style. So you're sitting around with all these people, and you come with your friends, whatever. But at the end of the night, you're friends with the entire room. And
that's the greatest thing. The thing that I never expected, never could have dreamed of in a million years. The way it would bring people together. That really is the essence of being Italian, is to bringing everybody together over a meal. I never do business with anybody until I have a meal with them. I never have. Because you learn a lot about people when you sit down and you have a meal with them. You learn if they're a slob. But I really feel like that you have to share that experience with people to get to know someone. Because you're kind of forced into a situation where you have to let your guard down. And you find out a lot about people.
You don't look pretty when you're eating.
No, nobody looks pretty when they're eating.
And you shouldn't look pretty,
especially Italian
you should
food.
be enjoying it.
Nobody looks pretty. Nobody looks pretty eating spaghetti.
No.
Nobody. I don't care how good you think you are with it. Nobody looks pretty doing it. But that was one of the coolest things about doing what we did, was that it brought all these people together that might normally never certainly sit down at the same table and share a meal, because you were passing these big platters of food, and you were singing and drinking and dancing. It was like a big love fest.
It's Italian world peace, man.
It's Italian world peace. Everything can be solved with a dish of pasta. I know, exactly.
And now you're here.
And now I'm here in
Nashville itself, not Franklin.
Yeah. So we did that for 5 years, and then about a year and a half ago, I decided, it's time for me to do my own thing. Because I had just kind of burnt out doing it in that space, and I had grown as much as I could grow.
Sure.
And I wanted to make this more than just a weekend thing. So I said, I'm going to look for a place in Nashville, not too far downtown, because I didn't want to lose the people that lived in Franklin and Brentwood. So let me find something in the middle. And it took me a year and a half to find this place.
Yeah.
I looked at so many other places.
Can I tell you? So I work out at the little place just down the, in the same little strip. Whatever it's called, or whatever it's called. Get Fit Anytime.
Get
something
Fit,
like that.
yes.
Get Fit Anytime.
Get Fit Anytime. Try them.
Yes. And one day, I didn't know that this was going. I didn't know what was happening.
Right.
And I walked to my car, and I looked up, and the sign was being painted, and I was like, no. I can't even tell you, I called like 10 people. I was so excited. I was
That's
like,
awesome.
oh my God.
That's awesome.
Because I realized that it wasn't going to just be a weekend thing, that I could wander in here by day.
Yeah.
And eat a lunch that would be insanely good. And your food, you are so...
Watch the water's going towards your computer there.
That's
you
not
don't
good.
want that down.
Your food is so very good. Thank you for not... We don't want to be electrocuted.
No, we won't be electrocuted.
That'd be the second time I've been electrocuted today.
Oh, wow. I'm on 3. Yeah, so we still do the Friday and Saturday night feast here.
Yeah.
And then during the week, I wanted it to be something a little different, because I was... And just one thing I didn't mention, I was the first person to do a pop-up dinner in Nashville.
Really?
I didn't know what a pop-up was.
Yeah.
And this was 5 years ago. Nobody was doing pop-ups here.
Yeah.
And then one of my friends said, he was trying to describe it to somebody, and says, yeah, Nick does a pop-up. I'm like, what is that? He says, well, it's when chefs go into somebody else's space and they pop up for a little period of time, and then they take off.
Yeah.
Well, I had more of a stay-up, because I was... in the same place.
The kind of man I love.
That's the kind of man I like, yeah.
Pop up and stay up.
Pop up and stay up. 5 years. You should definitely
Go
call
to
a doctor. You should definitely call a doctor. 4 hours? This guy's for 5 years.
Go
call a doctor.
Call a doctor.
See a medical professional.
For God's sake. I know he's
Absolutely.
Italian, but good Lord.
Jesus, that's insane. So when I decided to do this, I said, you know what? I don't want to do a normal Italian restaurant. I want to do something that nobody's done here before. So I went to Italy last year and spent 2 weeks in Italy really kind of researching what I wanted this to be. And I decided that I'm going to make it a traditional Italian focaccia. I'm not necessarily going to serve pasta during the week. It's all going to be based off this focaccia recipe. And that's where I discovered the black carbon bread in Italy. Mm-hmm. And then I came back and figured out how to make it, which was a labor of love, to say the least. And then I started really working on the gluten-free bread, because I wanted this menu. You know, when you would come to the weekend thing on the Friday and Saturday nights, I tried to keep most of the menu gluten-free just to make it easier for us and make it easy on people too, so they could have everything just about. But it wasn't everything, and I had not been making gluten-free focaccia. So I really worked on perfecting that.
Thank you.
And yeah.
You nailed it.
Thank everybody. I mean, it's just... people tell me that's the best gluten-free bread they've ever had. And that's like a
ridiculous.
Huge compliment.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, because again, I know what it's like. And I think that was the advantage that I had, maybe more than some other chefs, because I had first-hand experience of living with someone who has celiac disease and eating gluten-free and tasting all the stuff that's out there, and the majority of it is really not good. It's getting better.
It is.
But 5 years ago, it was very, very limited. So I wanted everything to be, very traditional Italian. I set the place up like a traditional place would be in Rome or Venice. The patio. Then I decided to put a bocce ball court outside, and that's exciting for me because, I love just hanging out.
Never played it. I need to come play.
You need to
You'll have to give me a lesson.
It's a lot of fun. So, this is the first focacceria in Nashville.
And it's incredible.
Thank you.
You have done your ancestors proud.
I am very proud of it.
Yeah.
Very proud of it.
I'm curious, when's the moment where you go from being a guy who cooks to chef? Is that like a degree? Or
well,
is it...
and that's the thing too. When I first started doing the pop-up thing, I was very hesitant to call myself a chef. And then after I was doing it for a while, I called my friend who trained me, and I was like, man, should I even, am I qualified to call myself a chef? I mean, is this just something that I can do, or am I just a cook? He says, you're running a restaurant. He says, these are your recipes. You're running the restaurant. You're running the show. You're a chef. And then I saw somebody ask Tom Colicchio, who's just one of my heroes, just as a chef. He does great things. Who was also a CIA graduate. I saw somebody ask him on Twitter. CIA, yeah, Culinary Institute of America. He's a CIA graduate. He's one of the few that got out. And somebody posed the same question to him. They were like, well, at what point do you, I have a restaurant, I run the kitchen. Can I call myself a chef? I didn't go to culinary school. He says, being a chef has nothing to do with culinary school. You're running a restaurant, they're your recipes, you're a chef. He said exactly verbatim what my buddy in LA said.
That's so like telling a musician they're not a musician if they can't read music, right?
Yeah, which is a lie.
Yeah. Tell it to Jimi Hendrix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, he says you should be proud and confident to call yourself a chef.
Yay.
And, I've only gotten better. I've only gotten better, doing this. And, I trained. It's not like I had no experience when I started this. I mean, I worked, in a lot of kitchens in Nashville before I thought to open my own thing. So it wasn't like I came into this like, just some guy who makes spaghetti sauce at home and says, "Hey, let's open a restaurant."
They're like, "This is SpaghettiGos."
A little more experience went into it. Yeah, it's SpaghettiGos. A little more experience went into it. I had a catering business in New York, so by the time I opened this place, I had 20 years experience cooking. So,
I think that's chef worthy.
I'd like to think so.
Yes.
I'd like to think so, and I'm confident to call myself a chef now. And I put myself up against other chefs who call themselves chefs and probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Chef Nick, you are amazing. I love your restaurant. I love your food. I love you. You're a super cool dude. And thank you for being on Human.
Thank you for having me. I feel very human today.
Yay! Everybody, eat some yummy Italian. Come to Mangia in Nashville and get full. Yum!